Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Lifeonaire Show. I'm your host, Jason Wojo, and we are joined by Vinny Boombat's Polish Peter.
Hey!
Hey, forget about it.
Forget about it. Oh, man. I needed a slap. I mean,
Yeah.
Vinny Boombat's here. We're going to talk about lots of things today. Yeah.
Right. I got a pair of concrete boots. They're in my trunk.
Yeah. Talk about hire. We're going to hire today. Vinny Boombat's knows how to hire here and there and everywhere.
well, Peter, we are interviewing ourselves for this episode, and so with that being said, we're going to talk about something that every business owner. Listen, this is one of the most important transitions a business owner will ever make, especially in the early stages of their business, which is when to bring someone else on and how to do it and how to delegate tasks, how to get somebody else in your team so it's not a one-man, one-woman show. You're not you're not just running the circus, but typically a lot of businesses that resemble circuses, you're the performance, you're the acts, you're the clowns, you're the lion, you're doing everything, right? And that works up to a point, and then very soon there's a fork in the road that you either choose to go and continue along the path you've been on and risk serious burnout and being the lid on your business, or taking this other path and bringing somebody else on.
Yeah, I mean, so if you are burning out in your business, or you're starting your business and you're burning out, feel like you're going 90 miles an hour and doing 80 hours a week, or if you're hiring people and all of a sudden they keep leaving, listen to this particular episode, because this is going to hopefully reveal some of the things why things are not working the way you want them to be.
Yep. So let's do it, dude. Let's go right into the episode with ourselves.
That's right.
All right, man. Welcome to the show, Peter. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for joining us too. Listen, I think it's a very interesting episode, because I wonder if I'm going to be able to hire you or not, or fire you, or
I might get fired from the podcast. This is interesting. This could be the real task here. Well, so listen, man. We're gonna, now. Let's just back up for a second. As somebody makes a transition, well, no, let me back up even further. You start your business. Most entrepreneurs, most business owners, if you're a real estate investor, whatever it is, it's usually, not all the time, but 9 times out of 10, it's all you. Like, you're the person who does everything in the business. Like, you're doing A to Z. You're doing the bookkeeping. You're doing inventory. You're selling. You're marketing. You're everything. All operations, finance, everything. And so that's great up to a point. I mean, you have to have proof of concept, and it's not like most people can afford to go out and hire people right off the bat. But at some point, you have to make that transition, because otherwise, it's a dead end. And yes, I understand that some people can continue on that path for quite a long time, but really, I think that you got to look at this and stop thinking like a business operator and start thinking like a business owner, and start to look at this as something that, if you want it to provide for your life, and ideally doesn't 100% require you, that's probably something that interests you and you should consider moving towards.
Yeah, and this is one of those conversations I have a lot of my students, because a lot of them coming in as a single person operator. And guess what? If the business is not growing, if things are not happening, guess why that is? Guess what the bottleneck is?
Yeah, right.
Right? And first, you got to get the realization that you are the bottleneck.
Yeah.
Because until you get that, you're going to be, because think about it, if you're going 20 hours and 20 million hours a week kind of a thing, right? And you're running around with your hair on fire and you're trying to do all those kinds of things, you can't perform at your optimal. You can't grow. You can't make more money. You can't, most of the time, here's the important aspect too. Most of the time, what I find, and Wojo, tell me if I'm wrong, but I find most of the time, these people spend the time most on the tasks that are not making them money.
That's a huge point, man. And so we're going to talk about that, because here's the thing, like there's so many tasks in a business, and all of them by nature have a different financial association, meaning like, hey, this is a $10 an hour job or responsibility, and this is $100, this is $1,000, and you are diluting your business, you're capping it, you're quite frankly costing your business a lot of money, way more than it would cost to hire somebody in most cases. And so you have to really look at this. And so, but Peter, before we even talk about like the details here, like what do most people say? And this is right up your alley, Peter, because this is a mindset shift that somebody has to go through first that says, I'm ready to hand off some things, because we hear all the time objections from people like, hey, it takes too much time to find the right person. It takes too much time to train the right person. You know, people are lazy, people are irresponsible, people can't be trusted. I can do it quicker myself. Yeah, how about this one? Nobody can do it as good as I can do it. Anybody ever hear that one before?
Right.
Nobody cares about my business like me, right? It's on me if this thing sinks or floats. And like, so we hear all these tons of objections.
It costs too much, or I don't have the money to hire the person.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. Or I had somebody, I tried it in the past, didn't work, and I gave up. Okay, that's like a kid trying to walk and they fall and they're like, all right, that's it, I'm done walking. I'm just gonna do this crawling thing forever. Like you have to realize, all of us, I think, and I just had a conversation yesterday, Peter, with a student who was basically the same thing. She was afraid to let go. And so you have to get through that and realize what you're actually costing your business by not letting go. In terms of you're doing things that are below your wage, below your skill level, which are costing you. You're dropping balls that are costing you. Some things, quite frankly, it doesn't matter if maybe they are 80% as good as you, but is 80% as good as you good enough, right? Does it really matter?
Yeah, and it all comes down to what's between the 2 years here. Yeah. I'm telling you this from my experience from coaching a lot of people. It comes down what's between the 2 years. It has nothing to do with money, nothing to do with whether or not somebody can do a job as good as you can. Because if you're telling me that somebody can't do a job as you can, go tell that to someone like Jeff Bezos, who has 50 million employees. I don't know exactly how many employees he has, but he's got a ton of employees, right? How is it that if nobody can do a good job as good as you, he has a multi-billion-dollar corporation? Okay. Yeah. So all those excuses come down to what's between the 2 years. And a lot of it has to do with, letting go.
It's fear.
Looking good, right? It's fear-based, or looking good, right? Because if I'm doing that, I actually had a conversation with one of my students yesterday who, I don't want to, say his name or whatever, but he literally in his business, he has a business that a lot of stuff on a yard and things like that. And he went with his employees, put up 500 feet of fence. And I started having conversation with him, and comes down to the fact that when he was growing up, his dad was very driven. He's still very driven. He actually told me, like, my dad can do in the same amount of time 3 times the work that most people can do. So I'm like, what was that like growing up with him? He's like, well, I was always had to be one step ahead, right? I had to anticipate, like giving them the hammer, right? I had to be the guy who's showing up, right? Can't sit around, can't be lazy, right? Because guess what? If I'm not working hard, I'm being lazy.
Right.
That was the realization kind of for him, right? Well, so I'm asking him, like, what does it look like for you to be smart, working smart? Is that being lazy? You know what I mean? So a lot of it has to do what's going on between the 2 years. And once you recognize it, and for different people, it comes different ways, right? One person's going to be like, well, if I don't work hard, I'm lazy, right? Some people, like, if I don't work 80 hours a week and come home, guess what? I'm coming home to what? To problems, to fights, or whatever the case may be. We had those kinds of conversations too, right? That somebody's going to turn such a big workaholic because they don't want to hang out at home. Right? They want to avoid certain things. So they're going to pour themselves into the work. So there's all kinds of different reasons depending on where you're at as a person, right? And once you recognize that, it's almost like a light bulb moment that goes off. And you say, so what would that look like if I just let it go? If I just let go some of that reign, right? Let somebody else do it. Let somebody else take on some of those tasks. And you don't have to start off very big. Just start a little bit. Right? And you're going to see some progress for yourself.
So, and we're going to talk about how to do it, but that's a great point because, and here, if you have created your Lifeonaire vision, which by the way, we teach at our Get a Life Getaways, and you have determined that you really want to be a solopreneur and do everything, okay, that's fine. We're not saying that's wrong, but most people, when they really sit down about it, don't want to be slaves to their business. And when you are the only component of that business and the entire thing runs on you, then you are kind of at its mercy to some extent. Right. And for most people, creating some sort of asset that does not require you 100% is desirable. So let's talk about a little bit about this. And we're not going to talk about building systems yet. This would be a different episode. We're not going to talk about eliminating things and how to choose that. We're not going to talk about technology and things like that. We're going to talk about delegation and hiring people. And so, of course, like the first thing you got to realize is the point of delegation is there's a few points. One is to get things off your plate, right? And that's probably the biggest, and to reduce your bottleneck factor in the business. And when you pull things off your plate, it's to open up things that you enjoy more, that you're better at, that are your highest and best use, so that you can really focus on your unique strength zone. And everybody has this. And so this is where, having a business vision is helpful. And we help people do that as well. But you really need to figure out what are the things you should be doing and want to do in your business. And if it doesn't interest you, you're not good at it, it's not your highest and best use, there's a really good chance that you should be pulling that off your plate.
Yeah, and I actually have my students do this exercise that I call brain dump. And you literally brain dump everything that's going on in your business, like literally everything, down to go and buying paper for your printer, right? You literally put down everything on the whiteboard that you have some kind of involvement that happens, right? So once you do a brain dump of the entire business, everything that's happening, whether you're actually in it or not, then you start circling, okay, which ones of these am I actually touching? Which ones of these am I actually doing, right? And then starting to recognize which one of these are very cheap, kind of like $10 an hour jobs, right? And start looking at that. And then looking from the perspective of how much time do I actually spend on this? And this is, listen, during this particular exercise, you got to put on a hat of an accountant, right? Someone who's like what do they call them? The IRS agents, the auditor,
like auditor,
right?
Yep.
Auditor, right? You got to put on the hat of an auditor and start actually looking. That's why when we do a coaching, session, and when I do these, let's say a full day with a student, what I do is we literally are very critical of it, right? Because guess what? That student is going to say, well, you know what? I do that, but it's on the way to the grocery store. I'm actually going groceries. So I stop by and pick up the paper. Okay, great. But listen, there is a reason behind all that. So once you circle these things up, next thing, start looking, okay, which one of these items are my most ROI items, return on investment, right? And actually see how many of them you actually do on a daily basis. And most of the time, I'm telling you, when people are not growing in their business, guess what? Those highest ROI items is not something that they do. They do the maybe 20% all at the time of that, and the rest of it is all the other stuff.
Well, and think about it this way too. And so when you do that, there's a few consequences that most people don't get. Now, let's assume, first of all, that we have to remember the entire purpose of our business is to provide for the life we want, right? And so there's a good chance, number one, you're sacrificing parts of your life because you're too busy working to get everything done on your own, that other parts are suffering. The other thing is what you're effectively doing is driving down your wage and your value to the business. So say, for instance, you spend 80% of your time doing $10, $20 activities and 20% of your time doing the high level stuff. What you're doing is decreasing the value that you add to your business. And so effectively what you're doing is you're making yourself less competitive as a business because you no longer can compete with somebody because you're doing the stuff that's easily outsourceable, easily delegatable, and you're hurting yourself. The one thing that I hear often is like, and by the way, like, because we all have limited amount of time, you really have to get those things off your plate that are below your skill level. And the other thing I hear from people is like, okay, well, if they do it, what if they do it 50% as good as me? And I'll say like, okay, well, here's my question to you. You have so much on your plate that this thing isn't getting done at all. You haven't done any marketing. So them being 50% as good as you, if you were to do it, is actually much better than it not getting done at all. So even if they're not even good at it, right, you're not doing it. So you're still favoring the approach of that delegation has to occur in your business. And so that's something really important. Now, let's talk about how this actually happens. And actually, we'll talk a little bit later in the episode of how to attract the right kinds of people in your business. But delegation doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to complexify it. That's one of our favorite Lifeonaire words here. Like Peter said.
Where that came from. Who came up with that word? Just give you a hint. That other guy.
So here, the exercise that Peter mentioned, he calls it a brain dump, I call it a business breakdown, whatever you call it. All you're doing, like he said, is you're literally, if you've ever had like a model car or a piece of furniture or a piece of equipment where you open up the manual and it shows you on the front page, that first inner page shows you the entire thing, but it's all pulled apart in different pieces. And it shows you how the whole thing goes together. That's all you're doing. You're pulling apart every part of your business, every responsibility, every role, every action, everything that needs to get done. And you're circling the things that you want to do. You're indicating the ones that you should be doing. And then everything else they're your potential things to be outsourced, to be delegated. You start with the small stuff, right? And we'll talk about how to pick those things right now. But it's a process. And one of the things that we say is start off with a low risk activity. Don't pick something that is going to cripple your business if they screw it up. Don't pick something high risk where it's really, really crucial to the function of your business. Pick something that's fairly insignificant, quite honestly, and see how they do with it.
Right. One thing that I want to mention on the brain dump that I forgot to say, I think it's really important, not only the task that you are doing, but the thoughts that are going through your head. So like when you're at home eating dinner, what are you thinking? Because that's part of the whole entire process. So that's very important. So going back to what you just said, Wojo, is that, yeah, I mean, the low risk activities, like for instance, when you're an investor, are you the one replacing the toilets? Right? So is that a low risk activity? I would say so, because there's plenty of people out there who can replace the toilet. Right? And I use that example a lot with my students because I'm like, how much is it going to cost you to replace the toilet? Well, it's like, $100, $200. So to them, that seems like an expensive thing. But if you shift your thinking on how that works, that low risk activity, because guess what? During that time when you're replacing that toilet, what could you be doing?
You're costing yourself money.
Yeah. And because guess what? You have 24 hours in a day, just like everybody else. I don't know if you know this or not, right? But you have the 24 hours in a day. And if you're replacing the toilet, you're not going talking to the buyers and sellers and all those kind of things, right?
Right.
And I think a lot of times people do these activities to not have to do the actual activities that are making the money. Does that make sense?
Sometimes it's fear, right? It's like, I want to do the easy stuff because I'm afraid of doing the important stuff.
Right. Because then I have to talk to sellers or buyers or whatever. So if I'm just busy, I'm working on stuff, then I kind of have an excuse. So low risk activities. So that we're talking about like a $10 an hour job.
Yeah.
Right. How would you know what's a $10 an hour job, Wojo?
Well, there's a couple things. So first of all, I would look at what are the things that you could hire someone to do that is on that pay grade. So for instance, should you be the one putting out all your social media posts, your blog posts, or should you be the one transporting materials? Should you be the one who's, going to Home Depot and pulling the items off the shelf? Should you be the one that's ordering, whatever? Like those are super easy things to do. And so typically what I see is to answer your question, Peter, the lower value stuff is typically the things that are not income generating. Income generating activities, IGAs, is where you will likely want to focus. The planning, the strategic thinking, these are the things that are higher value, but the things that almost anybody can do, and that's a low skill level required for it. Those are the things you really want to. Those are low wage jobs that you could probably get off your plate.
So how would you know which one's an income generating activity? Because guess what? If I'm going to the Home Depot, right, and picking up the tile, ultimately that's going to generate income for me, right? Because I'm going to put it in the house and I'm going to sell the house. So how do you determine which one's an income generating activity?
So there's a couple ways I would do that. One is this, first of all, how long is that path to income? And is this a direct correlation to income? Like, so for instance, am I talking to a seller where I can buy a house, or am I, putting, because you could argue along that line. That's a great question, Peter. should I be putting my marketing, should I be licking envelopes, right? And addressing envelopes? Because you could say, well, this is something that generates income down the road. But and now the copywriting, for instance, of that envelope is a higher skill activity. It's a higher income generating skill that's less easily taught. Maybe that's something that is be a higher level than licking envelopes and addressing stamps. Sorry, writing envelopes and licking stamps.
Yeah, okay. Licking envelopes and posting stamps.
Yeah, what do you think?
Posting envelopes and licking stamps.
Yeah. I don't know. Shaking babies. Right. Yeah, shaking babies.
Tomato. What's the difference, right? Yeah, I mean, I agree with that because here's the thing. And I think a lot of it has to do with the 80-20 rule, right? I mean, if you really think about it, the activities that you're doing in your business, 20% of the activities that you're doing in the business are actually going to account for 80% of your profits. So even if you look at that one process that you're talking about, let's say marketing, and you start from licking envelopes all the way down to signing the contract with that buyer or seller, right? Looking at the entire process, which 20% of that entire process could account for 80% of your profit from that deal. So if you look at it from that perspective, you quickly see that the envelopes is not going to account for that, right?
Yeah, right.
Because even if you break that down, like in a scale from 0 to 100, you're going to see that quickly the talking to a seller, signing the contract, driving to the seller, that kind of stuff is what's generating the 80% of the entire deal. Does that make sense?
Yep. So that's a great point too. And so how does all this work? All right. So we already talked about low risk activities, low skill level activities. Sometimes the things that are kind of redundant that you want to get off your plate as well, like sending out marketing, right? What I would encourage you to consider doing is as your employees, as your contractors, however you decide to classify this, as they start doing this, you simply let the rope out slowly. And by that, I mean, you give them a little bit more responsibility, a little bit at a time and see how they handle it. And this will do two things. One is it helps them grow in terms of their ability to handle more complex tasks, but it also, quite frankly, helps you a lot with the mindset shift that has to occur for you to be successful in outsourcing, so that you're not trying to, so you build confidence in the process, you build confidence in the person.
Right. Before we dive into this, should we mention, because I think it's a really important thing for us to mention the fact about seeding, or dead or seed, or whatever you want to call it here, because I think, when you look at all these activities, you don't want to be handing off stuff to that could be eliminated, or stuff that can be automated.
Well, that's way beyond the scope of this. We can mention what that is, but I do not want to get into how to do that. What Peter's referring to is there's a process that I named it SEED, SEAD, strategically eliminating automation and delegation. And Peter's like, well, I like deliberate elimination, automate, and I'm like, well, that's probably a little less uplifting. so we want to seed, but that's probably beyond the scope of this episode. Yeah. So let's just talk about. You have something to say?
But just quickly, I just want to mention, listen, before you look for somebody to hand this off, make sure that you're not handing off stuff that you can easily eliminate.
Yeah.
Or that you can automate. First eliminate, second automate, then you delegate stuff.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yep. And that's also why the acronym is arranged that way, strategically. Yeah. EAD, eliminate, automate, delegate. That's the order to look at. So all right,
now you're delegating.
Yep. So you start letting the rope out. Now, what this looks like very, very on a granular level, it's a very simple 3-step process. Number one, I'm going to do it and you're going to watch me do it. Okay. The person you just hired is going to watch you do it and see how you do things. Second step, you do it and I'm going to watch you. Right. And so now we make the transition to they're doing the action and we're supervising. And thirdly is you do it on your own independently. And I just check in periodically, make sure the results are on track, make sure things are going smoothly. But it's a simple 3-step process to make delegation happen. And people just really make it to be way more than it has to be. That's all it has to be.
Well, a lot of the reasons I think why they make it more complicated is because of the whole thing of letting go, right? Because you will hire that person and all of a sudden it's like, you're sitting there and you're wondering, is he doing the job? Is he doing it? I should check in. I should do this. I should do that, right? And then sometimes it ends up looking like a micromanagement. And sometimes it ends up looking like, you don't trust the person, or whatever it might be, right? And so the 3-step process that Wojo just mentioned allows you to be able to confidently step away from that task, right? Because if you do it and they watch you, and they do it and you watch them how they do it, and then just do it on their own, it's like, then it gives you the confidence, hopefully, to just let it go. The problem is with you letting go. So if you're the kind of a person, my assignment to you, go listen to the song Let It Go by Frozen, okay? From the movie Frozen, start listening to the song Let It Go, all right?
So, yeah. So, it's finding that fine line, right? Like you need to ensure that you're getting the results you want. But you have to kind of really realize this is a process. And so as your comfort level with this person grows, your management style and leadership style will shift as well. So one thing I want to point out here is oftentimes people miss this. I'll hear from a student, they'll say, hey, I tried doing that once and it didn't work. I tried twice, I tried 3 times, and it doesn't work. And what I'll say is like, listen, you have to realize that your ability to hire, to screen, to train, and to lead someone is a completely different skill set than you being able to do it yourself. And this is a huge thing that people miss. And so you might be awesome at swinging a hammer or putting on a roof, but you may be terrible at training and teaching somebody how to do this. And so you have to realize that many times that bad employee that you hired, it really was your fault, and you have to look at yourself and where you kind of let them down. Maybe you were unclear in expectations. Maybe you didn't provide enough detail. Maybe you provided too much detail. Like maybe you were unclear with something regarding the process. And so you have to realize these are different skill sets. And by the way, don't beat yourself up about this. If you've been bad at this in the past, it's something that can be learned and something that can be nourished. But you just have to develop it. And so some people don't want to do that, which I'd say is kind of short-sighted if you actually want to run a business. And so you just got to develop this other skill set along with your ability to really start focusing on what your best use is.
Right. And, these are great points because that happens a lot, which you just mentioned. The other aspect that I hear quite often from my students is, and this is a big problem that I see, is that people hire not for the position, but they hire for the people that they like.
Yeah.
Because typically what we end up doing is we end up hiring people that we like. We get an interview. I'm like, I really like this person, right? I resonate with him. We're good with each other, right? We're, like 2 peas in a pod, right? Kind of a thing, right? And you're like, okay, this person might be good. However, that person can be completely wrong for this position.
Because think about it, you're hiring somebody to do the things you don't want to do. So if you are completely like them, they probably don't want to do them either.
Yeah, so Wojo is totally right, man. If you hire someone who's not right for that position because they got to be the opposite of you, and you hire someone who's just like you, they're not going to work out very well.
Right.
And that happens a lot, So making sure that you hire the person for the right position is very important.
And Peter, we'll have another episode on hiring because people are going to want to know about that. And you and I have experience with that. The one other thing I want to say about delegation is the better you get at developing those skills, not only the better, your results will be, but something really cool happens because even if you have some poor experiences with people, if you do this right, you're learning, you're growing, you're seeing what to do, what not to do. And so don't get frustrated. Don't get overwhelmed or defeated. Like look at it as learning opportunity. And so here's something else cool we haven't talked about yet. Now, when you hang, when this person, remember the 3-step process I just mentioned with you doing it, they watched that whole thing. Ideally, what's also happening, and you're doing this, make sure, this is a pro tip here. Have them, after they start doing it, create a standard operating procedure or a checklist or best practices or an instruction sheet for the jobs they're doing. So for instance, in Lifeonaire, we use Google Drive a lot. We use Google Sheets, Google Docs, and it's a very convenient way for us to keep everyone on the same page. And what I've done is our employees, I'll have create a list of, hey, here's the step-by-step process to get this thing done, which by the way, for you, makes your business function a whole lot smoother. Everyone knows how to get things done. And if this person leaves, now you have a trail of ways that your next employee can come in and see how things have been done. We do videos as well, like Loom, for instance, is a software that is out there right now that we're using. And so this is something that really facilitates the learning and how quickly someone can get up to speed when you hire them.
Yeah, and eliminates a lot of the issues and problems and errors. And think about, if you look at like for someone like a Ford Motor Company and they have that assembly line, right? They have processes and checklists for every single part of that assembly line, because if you feel like all of a sudden you've been doing this for, a year, the same thing, and you feel like this is ingrained, and all of a sudden you're not paying attention and you miss that one thing, it can screw up a whole other thing.
Oh, yeah.
Pilots have the checklist every single time they get to fly, right? Even though they've been flying for a very long time. It's to eliminate oversight, errors, and things like that. And that's when you have those kind of processes. And by the way, if they end up leaving because they want to move on to something bigger and better, or you move them up in your own company, now that process can be easily handed off to the next person, and they can be onboarded a lot smoother and easier and faster.
Yeah, that's totally. Yeah, that's been a big benefit for us. One thing I do want to say about that is you're going to have to decide what your outcome is for these activities. And what I mean by that is, do you care how they get your result, or is it also important how they do it? And so this means, do you want to allow them some creativity? Like because by the way, this happens to me all the time where someone's like, hey, have you thought about doing this? And I'll be like, wow, that's a good idea. No, I didn't even think about that. And they discover an improvement or a tweak in something we're doing or something we can, do better. And so you have to decide, do you want it done a certain way, or is it just the outcome you care about? So you just got to be clear in communicating that. And that's kind of the last thing I think it's really important to focus on the topic of delegation, is being really clear with expectations. Depending on the person that you're dealing with, they could be someone that likes detail, and we'll talk about this in the hiring episode we do in the future, or they may like a little bit more autonomy. And you got to find out what that looks like, and just be really clear with them. Have frequent, clear communication regarding expectations, regarding, hey, this is what we're after. Be clear with things like deadlines. Be clear with how this is going to happen, because more times than not, any challenges I've seen any challenges that I've seen that have surfaced are typically, not always, the result of poor communication. Right. And usually it's the business owners, the leadership. Speaking of which, a little plug for Jocko's book, Extreme Ownership, is a great book for business owners to kind of look at. We'll have to get him on the podcast, Peter. And so I would encourage you to look at that before you assume that it's a character flaw in your hire, before you assume that it's something wrong with your hire. Look at your communication. Have you made all your expectations and desires known clearly and repeatedly? And then you can start to look at the other things. But that's always the first place that I would encourage people to look.
Yeah, I mean, one big takeaway from what you just shared, communication is the secret here. I'm telling you guys, clear communication trumps almost everything. Because guess what? That assistant, that employee, that contractor, hate to say it to you, while your wife or husband, they can't read your mind, right? So what's going on in your head, what you're thinking, how it should be, what it should be. And by the way, depending on their experiences, their circumstances, what they've been actually done and how they are, they're most likely going to come up with a different path to get done what needs to be done. So communication, clear communication, allows you to actually get what's going on in here, over there, and make sure, by the way, when you communicate with them, make sure that they tell you what they heard. That what is it that you were getting across, that they actually got what you were getting across, because guess what? You think that you got it across, and then a week later they come back with their stuff and you're like, well, that's not what I was looking for.
Right.
It's because you didn't get clear on the fact that what they heard is the same thing that you're trying to get across. Man,
that's huge. That's huge. Really make sure you're on the same page with that. And as far as those expectations and assumptions and not reading your mind, this just happened in Lifeonaire, where I had called an employee, didn't leave a message, right? Because if and I didn't leave a message, and I just figured, oh, I'm going to get a call back when they see that I called. Well, I talked with her after that. She's like, oh, well, I always thought that if somebody doesn't leave a message or they don't text me, that's not important, and you've probably found the answer. You don't need me to call you back. And I'm like, wow, like I never never thought of that, because when I call someone, I don't leave a message, because I myself hate listening to messages. So if I see somebody called, don't leave me a message. I'll just call you back when I can. And so there's a perfect, tiny, humorous example of how something small, you can have different views on something. So you just got to be very, very clear with your expectations and what that means in your communication. So yeah, totally with you on that one, man. What did we miss? Is that it? Is that it?
I think so. You don't listen to voicemails?
Yeah, all those voicemails you leave me, I haven't listened to them. Sorry.
So listen, guys. Here's Wojo's number. I want you guys calling and start leaving voicemails. Okay, right. 555. Yeah.
All right.
Well,
listen.
Be freaking out. I started actually putting your number out there.
Yeah. Don't start a war. Listen, I hope everyone's enjoyed this. This is a critical part of the business. This is a critical component of your business getting up and running, and you being an owner versus just an operator. There's a huge difference in the mindset and your activities and how you conduct yourself. So awesome. We will cover some other things related to this in future episodes, but if you enjoyed this episode, we would love for you to leave us a review, leave us a rating. If you would like to be part of the communication, right? Just I worked that communication word in there, Peter. Part of the discussions, head over to the Lifeonaire app. It's free. You can go to either download it from wherever you get your apps, or go to lifeonaire.com and you'll see a little button there for app, and you can access the desktop version. There's all kinds of incredible conversations going on over there every day, related to business, related to life, everything about having a better life, better business. And so, be part of the conversation. We'd love to have you over there.
And we're in there too. So come in there and join, listen, ask questions about this delegation. This is not an unusual topic that people are not wrestling with. So ask about that. There are plenty of people in there who have hired a lot of people. We have one guy that I know, and there he's got 40 some employees, right?
Yep.
We can know something about that. So there are people who are helpful and they're able to help you out.
That's it. All right, everyone. Till next time, live free.